First time I've been live in quite some time. So I'm going to wait a couple of moments. Hopefully, you guys can hear me okay. I know there'll be a couple of people coming in periodically, maybe not, just because it's the first time I've been live in a while. So I got to kind of get back into the flow of things as I start to feel better over time. But boy, the Panthers sure didn't do anything today to help me in my effort to feel better at all. But got a couple of points, couple of takeaways that I want to go through and just, talk about some things that I've seen and some things that, just make me disgusted, to my stomach. So what's up, Andrew? Good to see you too. I'll be speaking more to the chat as things kind of go along or whatever. But for now, I'm just going to kind of dig in. And like I said, I got 4 points I want to go over and then, answer a few comments and keep it moving. But so the first thing I want to talk about. All right. Starting off with a story, right? I can remember back in the offseason when Dan Morgan was adamant about the fact that he wanted dogs on this team. That's all I heard. Dogs, 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 right? And when you look up and down this roster, I think about, and I know I don't always like to harken back to the Cam Newton time, right? Because we're trying to move forward. We're not trying to be stuck on the past or anything like that. But I use Cam as an example because early in Cam's career, you would see Cam kind of sulking on the sidelines, right? Especially when things weren't going the greatest. But what Cam did not do was show zero enthusiasm. What Cam did not do is when he sat on the sideline, sit away from the team. Not a lot anyway. What Cam would not do is be someone that would show a lack of confidence in practice or anything like that. Now, I'm not saying that this is the case with Bryce Young, but what I am saying is that we have to lean on some kind of spark. I need to see you talking to your guys. I need to see that you believe in the people that you're throwing the ball to, right? As opposed to just, you see him on the sidelines. It doesn't matter good, bad, or indifferent. There's this like calm demeanor approach that he has. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that, right? Because I do think that you have to be able to ebb and flow with the highs and lows of playing an NFL, game as a quarterback. But at the same time, you've got to see some kind of spark from this guy. You have to see something that shows that this guy has the ability to galvanize people when you find yourself in these situations, especially hostile environments like you just walked into in the Superdome. Like, you have to be able to do that, right? So my first point, yes, Bryce was horrible. He was absolutely awful. I have been the biggest Bryce optimist probably in this community, and I'm okay with that. Like, I don't shy away from the fact that I was an apologist towards him because he has talent that you could see eventually translate possibly. But I do wonder something. I wonder, taking 62 sacks last year, like when I saw Bryce today, Bryce looked scared playing football. And that is not a good sign. That is a horrible sign, right? Fat people can't give out advice. That's hilarious. Anyway, the point is, I don't even know who you are, dog. Kick rocks. Anyway, so the point I was making, you can't give out, like, I'm sorry, that comment threw me off. Fat people can't give out advice. It's hilarious. That's nuts. Anyway, so as I was saying, the situation with Bryce, man, is like, you got to have some kind of confidence, man. Like, it really does look to me like this is a guy that's been rattled. Like, I see a guy that has been, when you get sacked 62 times in a season, psychologically, it's going to do something to you, right? Pressure was still sort of there today. Ike Kwano getting blasted, running backs getting blasted by a cornerback with 3 sacks, which is insane, right? But the point is that you've got to have some confidence to instill in this guy. One thing I didn't see a lot of, short intermediate plays, screens, stuff like that. Give him some stuff that allows him to gain his confidence, right? Because if you don't do that, then you're in a bad situation. Hey, Elliot, there's a dude named Running Man in here. Get him out of here. I don't know who that is. Appreciate you, man. Good to see you too. Look, I I don't mind getting joked at, right? I'm not giving advice. I'm just giving takes. But that take was kind of funny. I ain't gonna lie. That's pretty funny. But get him out of here. But anyway, so like I said, you got to have a guy that shows some kind of confidence at some point, right? And we just don't see that. Like, I don't see any confidence in him at all. But you also, as a coach, have to give him some plays to instill confidence. There's nothing wrong with check downs. There's nothing wrong with screens and things like that. But at the same time, one of the things that Bryce has to do is be okay with taking those kind of plays. Every play doesn't have to, like, I don't have to come out. I know everybody wants to see the deep ball. Everybody's fascinated with the deep pass. Like, no more ice cream. No ice cream for you. Oh my gosh. No more cheesecake for you. Look, bro. All right, let me see. There you go. Appreciate you. All right. Who is this person? I don't even know who this is. Good to see y'all too. I'm sorry. I usually don't have to do this kind of stuff because I usually don't have people like this inside my chat. I don't even know who Running Man is. Like, and I'm okay. Like, look, I have health issues and take medicines that, kind of hurt my cause. So I'm all right with that. Like, but I just don't have time for, silliness. But anyway, getting back to my points. You have a guy who needs some plays from his coaches to help him out. He's got to have some plays from his coaches that will help him to be able to figure out where his confidence can come from. Figure out, like, look, I was one of those people who was not a proponent of them playing in the preseason. I ain't even gonna lie. I'll just say it out loud, right? Like, looking at it now, though, I was wrong. And I'm open to admitting that I was wrong. I was dead wrong. They needed to play in the preseason. You need in a brand new coaching staff Kansas City, who's going for a three-peat, played their starters in the preseason. Carolina should have done it, right? More. I know we got to see him in the last game, but they should have played more. A couple of series in each game to kind of get familiar, because what I saw today was a team who looked like they were still in training camp mode, not a team that was ready for a hostile environment like the Saints. And not for nothing, I'm gonna salute the Saints. Like, one thing we got to realize, like, most of their core guys on that team, for the exception of Derek Carr and a few pieces that they've added here and there, their core guys like Tyrann Mathieu, like Demario Davis, like Taysom Hill, like Alvin Kamara, these guys have been there for multiple years, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, right? So, like, you're playing against a team. So there has to be some context for the whole team, not just for the point of Bryce, but for the whole team, there has to be some context. What is that context? You're playing against a team who has continuity. That's the one thing that we haven't seen here in Carolina, right? Really, ever. Man, we saw Sam Darnold. The tale of two different people happen between yesterday and today. Matt Rule goes to Nebraska, got them boys rolling, right? Sam Darnold's out there in Minnesota doing something similar that we saw him do first couple of games here in Carolina. But then it all seems to fall downhill. So at some point, I do think that we have to look at the team itself and suggest that, I'm not saying that we a snake bit franchise, but, like, I think what we are seeing is a culmination of horrible, horrible draft picks, a culmination of impatience coming from an owner, right? We can be impatient. As fans, when you pay money, when you give takes, when you do content, whatever it is that you do, I'm not that person. I'm the person who always tries to be the most patient and optimistic that I can be. Sometimes that does run thin, but, like, at the same time, at some point, you do have to be patient at some point. Like, I know that the immediate take is like, yo, we got to get ready to draft a quarterback next year. I mean, unless somebody's out there just, Quinn Ewers, whoever, Shador, whatever that looks like, if it's me, no way. There's not a chance. I don't care how bad it gets this year. You have got to build this roster. And you got to build this roster with some athletic players. You got to build this roster with some dogs. One thing that I hate seeing, man, and yeah, I saw this from the beginning of the game. This was before the score, turned up to 30-0 or whatever that looked like going into the second half. In the very beginning of the game, bro, when we threw the pick, when the Saints marched down, big play to Rashid, whatever his name is, for the Saints, that, huge play at the beginning of the game, the only person I saw on the sideline yapping was Jadeveon Clowney. That's very symbolic of what the Panthers have been like for a number of years, where we don't have players that seem to have like attitude, and it's like you almost have to be, things have to be going well for you to show any kind of enthusiasm, right? And Jadeveon Clowney is not really that guy. Like he's not been, I mean, he was, I guess, sort of, when you look next to the players that he's played with over time, whether it be Myles Garrett, whether it be J.J. Watt, Roquan and those guys last year, right? But that's not really been his pedigree because he hadn't really had to be that. He's had to be, like last year, he played a situational role and he played it to, played it very well, excuse me. But the point is like, that really hasn't been who he's had to be as a person for a very long time, right? Really, or if ever in his career. So to see that he's the only one on the sideline doing that is a problem. And one of the problems that I do have with Bryce, I'm just going to be honest, is that you don't really see that. You know what I'm saying? Like coming out and high-fiving your guys when they come off the field. Like, I get that. That's cool. And I like seeing that. That's cool. But what I don't get from him, what we don't get from him, and what really is a problem for me is like zero enthusiasm. Like with Cam, like I was making the example with Cam earlier until I got thrown off. You might not have been able to lean on Cam for being the vocal leader on the sidelines, like talking to guys, but trust and believe every single person on that roster was enthused when they saw his brashness and his, what some could consider arrogance when you saw him run into the end zone doing Superman and getting up, pointing for first downs and yelling and screaming on the field. That would get guys going. Like I was watching a podcast of his where he was talking about how he and TD used to argue in practice and like they would be going back, not argue, but like they would be chirping back and forth, being competitive. And then that would get Luke going. And then it would get, guys like Josh Norman going, which kind of led to that fight that they had. And so you just don't see a lot of that going on with this team. Like I don't know that I can't speak back honestly since the time that Cam left where you can really see that kind of like energy on the sideline of this team other than maybe Burns, but I mean, obviously he's not here anymore. So that's neither here nor there. So yes, Bryce played awful. Bryce played terrible. I'm not ready to throw out everything yet, but at the same time, we do have to call a spade a spade. He looked awful. He looked scared. He was inaccurate. All things that you just didn't really see from him. And I know that people look at it like, well, he played at Alabama. And I get that. But Alabama with Bryce is a lot different than the historic Alabama that most of the other quarterbacks from the past played for. Bryce had Bill O'Brien as an offensive coordinator. Bryce had, guys on his team that were, that operated good in space. It wasn't a run-heavy offense, right? A lot of RPO. Today, like similar from last year, like I see Bryce under center a lot, a little bit of play action from time to time, but not a whole lot of like run pass option, not a whole lot of underneath routes. The few times that you did see that, you could say that could take some of the ease off of the, the pass rush, and we just didn't see it a lot. But then there was a few times where he just didn't pick up a blitz, where a corner gets 3 sacks, which is nuts. But either way. So before I go to my next point, going to read through some of the comments. Rockhead says, big facts, dumpster fire. I believe that. Yes, sir. Everybody going crazy first game. I feel like we'd be all right. I mean, I sort of feel like that too a little bit, but I don't know. Elliott Block running man. Yep, agree. So moving on to my next point. Next point. I've never said this publicly, but I'll say it now. I say it behind closed doors when I have conversations with friends. I hate the 3-4 defense. Hate it. I do not like it. And there's a reason why a lot of NFL teams don't run it. There's very few that do. And I could be wrong on this. I'm not an expert when it comes to football, right? But if I had to guess the reason why most teams don't run the 3-4 defense, I would say it lays at the feet of the fact that the guys that you would be able to find at the outside linebacker positions do not grow on trees. I think the outside linebacker in the 3-4 is just as hard to find as a franchise quarterback because you don't see as many of those guys operate successfully over time. Now, we've had situations where we've seen people change position to become good at it, but not many. Jason Taylor would be a great example. There's a story that I read about Nick Saban talking to Jason Taylor when he took over as coach of Miami, and they switched the defense to a 3-4, and he thrived in it, right? Became a Hall of Famer as a result, which he was already good before, but that just took him to a whole nother level. But guys like him, Von Miller, Khalil Mack, those kind of guys, they don't grow on trees. I think it's a lot easier if you can find guys like like the traditional Carolina Panther base has been a 4-3, right? And how many guys have we had that we know for a fact are not Hall of Famers, but were extremely, extremely efficient in our defense over the years? Guys like Greg Hardy, guys like Charles Johnson, like we got one Julius Peppers. He left, and we still had a lot of production. We had so much production that we went 15-1 one year, right? With Charles Johnsons, with the Greg Hardys, with the, mentors, with the, you name it. Think of a guy that you would, put in a defensive position. Mario Addison. These are guys that aren't Hall of Fame players, but in a 4-3 defense, they're very, very productive, right? It's just a better defensive base, especially stopping the run and not having so many opportunities to have one-on-one matchups between a left guard and a linebacker getting absolutely destroyed, watching Josie Jewell fall over himself, or Shaq Thompson getting completely blown out of plays, right? So I'm not saying that you should throw the whole Avero card out the window, but I do think that there's a reason why, if you watch the last couple of games of the season, not this past season, but the season before, Al Holcomb takes over on defense, and they switched to more of a 4-3 base. Not only were we running the ball on everybody, but we were doing pretty good and pretty effective stopping the run. And that was with guys like YGM, Derek Brown. Like, these aren't all-world guys, right? Well, Derek Brown, I would say, but, YGM, not an all-world guy, but solid stopping the run. And we were sold this going into the offseason. Man, what's the kid's name? The Johnson kid that we drafted from Oregon, good at setting the edge. Jadeveon Clowney, probably be a sack specialist for us or whatever like that. We saw none of that today. We couldn't generate a pass rush at all, and it was awful, which makes me think like, all right, if we get back the guy we brought in from Minnesota, right? So we get him back. The sheriff guy, I saw that he was out there a little bit, but, it was kind of more in scrub and cleanup time. Like, who are you going to pull from? The Clavon Chasen move that they made, DJ Wanham is who I'm talking about, excuse me. But the Clavon Chasen move that they made almost looks like it was, something that they did too fast. Like, they made that move like way, way too fast, right? So I don't understand. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But anyway, the other thing, as I said, no dogs. When I look up and down the roster, man, like, I don't really see a lot of guys that I would point to and just say like, oh yeah, that's a dog right there. Like, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe y'all can school me on that. It doesn't feel like that to me. Like, when I look up and down the roster, I don't see, and I got to be fair. This is a whole new coaching staff, like top to bottom, new coaching staff, except for defense, of course. But the defense has a ton of new pieces. Brian Burns is not here anymore. YGM's not here anymore. There's multiple guys that we had in rotation, like Amari Barno, who's not here. Jeremy Chin's not here. Frankie Louvu's not here. So I do have to lend some credibility to the fact that it is going to take a little bit of time, because I did see Dave Canales say that, and I saw people kind of getting upset, like, oh, man, here we go. Another Matt Rule situation where, somebody says, like, the whole 7 years thing. But I do think at some point you have to get to a point where things settle down and we just be okay with being bad, but having the same bad show up a second year in a row. Because if the same bad shows up for at least one more year, I mean, think about it. First year under Matt Rule regime, right? What was it? Somebody the chat can, and I saw somebody say in the chat that I have said plenty of times, I hate the 3-4 defense. We were better than a 3-4. But I think somebody had said that many teams run the 3-4 defense. I could be wrong on that. I beg to differ. But regardless, the point is that in that beginning time with Matt Rule, as I was saying, Matt Rule comes in, and y'all can correct me on this. I want to say we had about maybe 8 games or something like that where we lost by like a score or like 7 points or less or something like that. I could be wrong. I don't know the exact number, but it was something in that realm, right? So Matt comes in, does that. The second time they come out, change quarterback, and he starts off 3-0. And it wasn't a pedestrian 3-0. Sam Darnold, at one point, I saw a graph on one of the games, I think it might have been again against the Texans, going into the Dallas game, where he had thrown more passing yards in those first 3 starts with a new team since like Kurt Warner with the Rams, right? So like, you could see, because there was continuity, because there was a staff that came back, right, that, okay, we got something here. And I personally believe because of how the season ended that year and still ending 5-11, I really believe that the team that Matt Rule and Fitterer slash Marty Herney had assembled, what Steve Wilkes was able to do with that team was a product of consistency and continuity. The guys that pretty much just quit on Matt Rule, and then Steve Wilkes comes in, which not for nothing, I just don't understand why Wilkes doesn't have a job. And I think most of it lies on the fact that guys just don't like young people don't like the kind of leadership that Steve Wilkes would instill, right? He's a hardcore guy, like, because I think I saw somewhere where he had like a, equal or better efficiency rating on defense than even D'Amico Ryan, and he got fired, right? So he just rubs a lot of young guys the wrong way because he's a very old school guy. But I think a lot of times, especially with a team like Carolina, like, and this is no knock on Dave Canales, this isn't a knock on Dan Morgan or any of the new regime, that we have right now. But I do think when you have a struggling franchise, right, like a struggling business or anything like that, like how many of these shows do we see on TV, like Hell's Kitchen or, the Bar Rescue and stuff like that? I have an uncle who's a great mentor to me, but man, he is hardcore, right? Because sometimes it does take those kind of guys to take an organization that is absolutely putrid and come in and turn it around, right? Even against like ownership that may stand completely against you, right? It takes those kind of guys to come in and completely change an organization. Now, that's not to say that the Canales way won't work. It's one game, right? It's one game, new regime. Who knows what this is going to look like moving forward. But the point is like, we just don't know how, like, I don't see how this gets turned around. Like, when I look at what we just saw defensively and how unprepared they look, how unenthused they look, who's going to provide the spark? That's what is a concern for me. So I'm still trying to remain optimistic because that's just my nature, right? But who's going to provide the spark? Like, when you look up and down this roster, getting Jonathan Brooks coming back from, a injury from last year in his college, like, is Bryce going to turn the page? I mean, I will say this: it's not the first time we've seen a quarterback be awful. I'll say not this awful. And I think the thing that Bryce doesn't get to his credit, like we saw him push the ball down the field a couple of times today. One deep shot to Leggett really late, right? That was an overthrow. Leggett had a bit of a step, maybe have a little bit of a push off, but whatever. But the point is like he has to play his game. The question is, what is his game? Where does he feel comfortable, and where can he provide that spark? Because it could be. I'm saying all this that I'm saying right now, and it truly could be, because I'm sure some of you would probably agree to this in your own walks of life. Like, some of you in your own walks of life probably have people that like a boss. Like, if you had a bad boss that you work for, right? And your boss is directly tied to your performance at work and your paycheck and all that kind of stuff. And you just know, like, there's really nothing I can do to be successful because I have this guy at the helm. I could be saying all this stuff about dogs and all this other kind of stuff. The truth is that we could have a roster that could be much better than we realize, but we don't see that because maybe those guys might think, man, we don't have a guy that we feel confident in winning with. I would hope that that's not the case, right? And again, one thing I do have to clarify, because one thing I don't live in a world where new information, like, I'm not a flip-flopper, right? I've been Team Bryce since day one, and that's not going to change. I want to see Bryce be successful. I don't want to see Bryce successful or see someone else fail, like a Stroud or Anthony Richardson, Will Levis, whomever else, right? Because I want to see those brothers successful as well. What I will say, though, is that if new information is provided to me, I'm not going to be so gun-ho on my take that I'm not willing to change. I don't see the new information enough yet. Like, I don't have enough data to just say, and I know some will be like, man, you crazy. Like, last year and this year, still not enough for me to say that Bryce Young is flat out a bust. No, not going there yet. And the reason is because we have multiple examples in the NFL. I can spell it out for you. Ain't going to do it today because it would take too long to do. But we've got plenty of examples in the NFL throughout the history of the NFL of players who have struggled 1, 2, even 3, 4 years into their career and then somehow, start to turn it around. Maybe it's a new situation. Maybe it's just time with the, current staff that they have, but eventually they start to turn it around. Now, What I will say though, for Bryce's case, is that with those guys, you could see like Anthony Richardson, for example, today. Anthony Richardson threw a pass 60 yards, seemingly off his back foot. I mean, uncorked a pass to Alex Pierce. Beautiful touchdown throw. I just haven't seen that from Bryce yet, and that does concern me. The middle of the field, even though he showed some efficiency last year, that stuff kind of concerns me as well. I am concerned about his lack of trust in the offensive line. A few times today, you could see where, yes, pocket gets blown up, he's got to go out, move around, and make a play. But there was a few times, and Mark Schlereth pointed this out. The first play to the second drive, play to Deontay Johnson, overthrow. What does Bryce Young do? Moving around in the pocket, overthrows the guy, or backing up, pedaling in the pocket, overthrows the guy. At some point, you got to trust your offensive line, your guards, to step up into the pocket so that Icky, when he does get blown, you've got some time before someone's sneaking up behind you. And then two, you just got to trust your guys, plant your feet, and deliver a strike. Because I saw that a couple of times today, and when he done that, the ball was accurate. So really, you have to start to, you got to trust those guys. But it is kind of scary when you think about it, because the third part of that whole thing that I was just talking about is, has he gotten sacked too much to the point where the trust can't be there because he's just afraid of getting blown up? I mean, to be the smallest quarterback in the history of the league and get sacked 62 times, it'd be impossible for that not to mentally do something to you. Impossible. But at the same time, what's also impossible is the expectation that he would master a Canales offense that looks completely different from the offense and personnel-wise than he had last year. So like Canales said, yeah, this is going to take some time. I'm not ready to bail out yet, but man, I got to be honest with you. I'd be lying if I sat here and said to you guys, I'm not concerned. I'm very concerned. Very, very concerned. So anyway, I just wanted to drop in, give a couple of thoughts. Nothing too much, man. Going to get back to making, meaningful content at some point soon. Things have been getting better. Health has been getting better. So it's just a process for me, but going to go through and look at some comments, answer some questions, see some things that people are saying, and maybe go through some of those as well. Let's see. Glad to have you back. Hey, I'm glad to be back. This is a 3 to 5 year rebuild. T. Murray says, I agree with that. Even Darnold played good today. We might be cursed. No, we're not cursed. I think here's our curse. Our curse is that I really do like, okay, who said that? My life, my story. Salute to you. Appreciate you commenting. I do not think that the Carolina Panthers are cursed. Here's what I think our only curse is, if there was one, because I don't believe in curses. But if there was a curse, our curse is impatience. Because why could I said this on Twitter? I'm not going to say who the content creator was. Salute to him, whatever. But I remember saying one time so Daniel Jones and the Giants go to the playoffs 2 years ago. And I remember tweeting something like to the effect of, and I'm saying this, verbatim, so I'm not quoting it, but it was something to the effect of what Daniel Jones is doing in New York is the same kind of game plan we could have for Sam Darnold. And this person added me and was just like, bro, you have no idea about ball. You don't know what you're talking about, all this other kind of stuff. I'm like, all right, man, whatever. But here's the thing. What we saw going down the stretch was that very thing, because around that same time, Matt Rule gets fired, and down the stretch, we go 6-6 and almost make the playoffs. And it was a hodgepodge of Sam Darnold and PJ Walker, right? So we eventually end up seeing the same thing anyway. So my question would be, okay, coming off of the back of that, what would have happened if David Tepper decided, you know what, I'm going to do the same thing the Raiders just did, and instead of, getting rid of Antonio Pierce, I'm going to keep Steve Wilks, let him build on top of this roster, because this is the most continuity on offense, and this is the best that I've seen on offense from this team since 2018, right? And I'm going to keep that nucleus together and let him build on top of that with him and Al Holcomb as the defensive coordinator. Let's see what they can do with it. And then we make a decision to do whatever we're going to do from there, right? Maybe, just maybe, could be wrong, could be dead wrong, but maybe, just maybe, you get a guy like Robbie out of the building that's not in Sam Darnold's face yelling at him on the sideline and stuff, right? Him hiding his face in his hat. Maybe, just maybe, he has a similar situation that he had the year previous where he went 3-0. or has a year similar to what he could have this year, but what we've seen in game one already with Minnesota. Maybe, just maybe. You never know. But the problem is that the owner acts very much like a few of our fans do. Not you that I'm speaking to, but a few of our fans honestly do, where it's literally like one bad game and you're ready to throw the whole season away. No, it's a long season. This thing is going to take time to come together at some point. But at some point, unless we want to just run this conveyor belt of just content over everything, which is pretty much what it is, right? Let's just call a spade a spade. Content over everything is like, yo, sometimes I need the team to be bad because it's more impactful to talk about the bad than when it's good, because we can run the numbers up, because everybody will want to yell inside the echo chamber, right? But at some point, you have to have some consistency. I personally believe, I don't care if it's the worst in the world, you have to give Canales 3 years. Personally, I believe you have to give Bryce Young at least 2 of those 3. That's just me. Even as awful as it looked today, even if it looks like this from now until the end of the season, right? Unless y'all believe that Quinn Ewers or Shador or whoever else is just absolutely all world, which they could be through evaluation, they could be, right? Canales may want to have his own guy. Could be. I could be dead wrong. I would say that you at least have to get, if we're going to go with the Canales mindset of, hey, this is more of a first year for Bryce because he's getting a fresh start, then why not give him 2 years? At least 2 years, so it comes to a total of 3. At least that's my opinion. Could be wrong. Don't mind. All right. Panthers R King says, do you think Bryce Young is the future in Carolina? I don't know. I honestly, I really don't know. I would like to say yes. But I don't know. I could very much see him having a very, very rough season. I could also see that this is something that we have to talk about as well. I've talked about this earlier. You may not have been here when I did it. But one thing we have to look at as well is this, is the Saints could be better. Each year presents a team that many people thought, like the Saints were on the cusp last year of making the playoffs. I think they finished 9-8, right? Sometimes those teams build on that momentum and come back better. Think about us. We were 7-8-1, right? And for some reason, I guess from the Panthers' perspective, well, really, I wouldn't even say from the Panthers' perspective. This is the perspective of a fan of any team that's not your team, right? Because I heard multiple people saying the same thing over and over again. Oh, the Saints aren't supposed to be that good, right? Or the Falcons ain't gonna be that good. Who cares what they put on paper and all this other kind of stuff? Man, you don't know that. We were 7-8-1 and ended up 15-1 in the Super Bowl, right? Were we supposed to be that good in 2015? Were we supposed to come off of a 7-9 a 6-10 campaign in 2016 and go 11-5, right? Were we supposed to be a team that when we faced Pittsburgh, we're 6-2, Cam blows up his shoulder, and we haven't sniffed the postseason or a record past 8 wins yet? Were we supposed to be that team? No. So the thing is, this Saints team could be 10 times better than any of us imagine. Players develop, right? Every front office is trying to get better. Everybody's chasing the Kansas City Chiefs. Everybody in the NFC is chasing Philly or chasing Green Bay. So, of course, they're going to make moves to try to get better. But the beautiful thing about the teams that are bad or either on the cusp is that instead of trying to hit a home run, they just do base hits. Okay, Marshawn Lattimore, we ain't got him. Okay, let's go do this. Or if it's and he may still be there. I don't know. I don't follow the Saints like that. But the point is, these small players, like I said, their core nucleus, the DeMarios, the Tyrann Matthews, the Alvin Kamaras, a lot of the Ramczyk guy who got hurt on the offensive line at left tackle, they had to start Trevor Penning. These are cornerstone pieces on their franchise. Can we say that? No, we can't. Why? Because we turn over like a conveyor belt. We can't say that. Shaq, in my opinion, I felt like Trevin Wallace should have got burned today. Because a few times Shaq looked absolutely terrible. He looked unathletic against a very athletic team. Right? Taysom Hill eating us alive. Pause. But the point is like I said, we don't have the continuity to know whether or not Bryce could be this team, this quarterback of the future, because nothing stays the same. And look, I know there may be people out there that completely disagree with my take on that, right? Especially after seeing this game. you would be right to do so. I'm not going to tell you how to fan, right? But I would hope that you would hear me out on the same thing. There has to be something to be said for the fact that we have literally seen two quarterbacks that people completely wrote off go to other franchises and thrive. Baker Mayfield thrived last year. Sam Darnold's looking great today. There's something to that. That something is that these guys were propped into places that had continuity. I'm not saying that you lay everything at the feet of David Tepper, but at some point, you got to call a spade a spade. This team will never be good if we just continue to keep, like, if we go with the fanship theory, if we go with the Twitter theories and all that kind of stuff of like, oh man, Dave Canales ain't it either. Got to look to get somebody else next year. Okay, we're going to be back in the same situation. We see it in college football. Listen, Colorado got blasted, right? Why did Shedeur Sanders take so many sacks? Because if you're taking guys off of teams that they're not starting over there, blue bloods, you showing me a graph of all these teams that these players are coming from, and they coming over here. What makes you think they're going to be better over here than they were over there? Transfer portal. You know what I'm saying? Like, look, I'm a Clemson fan. People killed Dabo Swinney about the quarterback situation. Hey, look, I'm one of them. I'm like, at some point, this whole thing, something's got to get worked out with this, club or whatever like that. So against Georgia, the beginning of the game, it looks like they were holding pace. Towards the end of the game, they got blasted. But what did they do to an opponent that they needed to come out and beat? One of the biggest scoring halves in ACC history, if not the biggest, from my understanding. Continuity. I don't have a lot of transfer portal coming in or out. Continuity, right? Wherever the chips are going to fall at the end of the year, they're going to fall. But one thing you're not going to say about me if I'm Dabo Swinney is that I had a losing record because I got continuity. You're not going to say that about me. So like I said, if over the years, let's say that we never drafted Bryce, and let's say that it was Darnold and we kept moving forward in the way that we were moving whenever it was, the situation with at the end of the season with Steve Wilkes. We could be one of those teams. We could be one of those teams that's kind of like, lying in wait to, okay, Darnold isn't the quarterback that's going to take us over the hump, but we still got winning record. We still in the playoffs, and then we find that guy. We develop that guy, right? Kaepernick to San Francisco. Yeah, they didn't close the deal, but they got there. Patrick Mahomes to Kansas City. They closed the deal a few times, right? But at some point, you have to build some continuity. So does that mean, to answer your question, I know I went long form, is Bryce going to be the guy? Don't know. I hope so. But if I had to guess off of today, if I'm leaning, I'm going to say I'm I'm going to say right now we're going to start the graph. I'm 30% no, 70% yes. My man, Elliot. Oh, you have to get players because he'll get. All right, so actually, Elliot, I'm going to come back to you in a second. Chris 2030 says Bryce isn't a guy to get along. Bryce isn't a guy to get to yelling at players because he'll get drugged. He has talent, but he isn't mean enough. Isn't rough enough. He isn't the epitome of keep pounding. He too quiet, too passive, too soft. I don't disagree with much of that. It's tough to hear, but I don't disagree with much of that. I think there's some legitimacy to every point. I do think, like, look, the quarterback, like, we had this same conversation surrounding Darnold, if y'all remember. The quarterback cannot be, like, extremely passive. I also don't need my quarterback to be over, like, exuberant either. I don't need a quarterback that can't handle big moments, right? I don't need a quarterback that's going to be, too highly upset. We've seen that from Kyler Murray before. Kyler looked great today, obviously. But we've seen moments where he's just been a little bit too aggressive, too upset, and run people off, right? But I can't have a guy – I got to have a guy that shows some kind of spark. And no, we don't see that a lot with him. I agree. Panthers for Life says, Bryce sucked today, but we also have to have a conversation about this defense. Hey, listen, I agree. I said it earlier. I'm not a fan of the 3-4. And it's not because the 3-4 isn't a defense that has produced. I mean, the 3-4 took a Super Bowl away from us. But the reason the 3-4 took a Super Bowl away from us is because most of the time in the 3-4, you have to have an all-world outside linebacker in the likes of Von Miller. And those guys don't grow on trees. There's a reason that Von Miller went in the top 10 of the NFL draft. There's a reason that Khalil Mack went so high in the NFL draft. There's a reason that TJ Watt goes so high in the NFL draft, because these guys are specialists at that position. Those guys don't grow on trees. You have a much better time finding guys that are 4-3 edge rushers. Look, think about it. So I think I've told y'all this before, but if you don't know, I'll tell you again. So Mario Addison, who had a stand-up career with the Carolina Panthers, who reshaped his career in football when he came here and played for the Carolina Panthers, played at Troy University. Well, my brother played at Troy University. He and Mario Addison were teammates and still good friends to this day. And so he starts off in Washington, comes here, and has an excellent tenure with us, gets paid, goes on, has a great career. But I wouldn't call Mario Addison a Hall of Famer. No disrespect to him, because I love Mario, right? But I wouldn't say that he's a Hall of Famer. I wouldn't say that I wouldn't call him a Hall of Famer. I wouldn't call Greg Hardy a Hall of Famer. Maybe you could have if he wouldn't have went so nut. But like, I wouldn't call either one of those guys that. Charles Johnson, I mean, I wouldn't call him a Hall of Famer. But ask yourself a question: is it easier to find guys like that in later rounds than it is to find a 3-4 guy like a Khalil or a TJ Watt? I think that we all know the answer to that, right? So, and it's not to say that some guys can't be stand-up edges, because we see that even in the 4-3. But it just, to me, it's a better defense against the run, because you, in a lot of ways, have a hat on a hat when it comes to defensive line. I just don't like the fact that in a 3-4, a lot of times during personnel groupings, you're gonna have guys that literally are unblocked, right? And if you have, we saw this today, very, very disciplined guys against a 3-4 defense will absolutely maul your linebackers. How many times did we see that today? I can't wait till the stats come out to see how many yards per attempt they had, because it had to be insane. All D3 said, is there a reason why Bryce goes number 1 in the NFL draft? Yes. I would say that, like, and I got to be honest with you. Like, I'm glad you said that, because this is I know that people don't want to hear optimism right now because of how bad it just looked, right? But let's just be honest about something, okay? There's no way, like, Bryce didn't have, like, don't get me wrong, Jameson Williams is good. Obviously, John Mechie has shown himself to be really good, right? And we know that Bill O'Brien is an all-world play caller. Nick Saban is the greatest college coach ever. It depends on how you think. Well, whatever. We'll just say that. So, with that being said, you've got an amazing staff to be able to cultivate talent. What I can't unsee, personally, it's hard for me, because Bryce was slated to go to USC, first of all. And Bryce went to Alabama. And I think that was on purpose. I think Bryce went to Bama because he knew, like we see now, that many people were probably going to judge him based off of size, right? Pause. So he goes to a place where, obviously he'd be able to showcase his talent at the highest level to get the highest looks possible. So why did Bryce go number 1 overall? It's because of tape that you can't unsee. It's because of anticipation that you can't unsee. We saw it last year. He's regressed in one game, yes, this year. But even last year, there were times where we saw where, okay, we see a flash here or there. The ball doesn't get pushed down the field a lot, but, we saw a couple of drives. We saw a drive against Atlanta in the rain. It was a low-scoring game, but, that can't unsee that drive. Coming into the draft, I can't unsee him hanging 460 yards, the most yards, passing yards in SEC championship history against Georgia. I can't unsee that, right? And this wasn't with Devontae Adams. This was with Jameson. This was with John Mechie. This was with, what's the kid's name? Cameron Latu, tight end. Jermaine Burton. These weren't the all-world guys. This wasn't Heisman winning Devontae Smith. So and that team, that Georgia team specifically, had 7 guys go in the first round, right? Jordan Davis and company. One of them went number 1 overall, and Travon Walker. So it's hard to look past that, right? Especially when you're doing draft eval. It's hard to look past his 500-plus yards against Arkansas. It's hard to look away from his ability to escape pressure and make plays down the field, right? And you can see where he's trying to do that here in the NFL, but it's much harder to do, one, because the hashes are so much closer together, and this offense isn't spread out as much, And two, because you don't have those same kind of guys nor the same play caller that you had to orchestrate that kind of offense. So yeah, in the beginning, yes, I can see why he was the number one. Now, obviously, when we look at it in hindsight now, I mean, you can make an argument based on what we saw today. Now, I don't know what happened at the end of the game, but I know Will Levis had a pretty good outing. You know, some people would say maybe Levis should have went higher, right? I still think it's a little too early to throw the book at him. This was an awful, awful, awful game. I'm not going to take that away. But I still think it's just a tad too early to say, like, he's not the guy. Now, looking back again, I even have to say this. I'm a Bryce guy. I was huge on Bryce going number one overall, right? And I still love C.J. Stroud. I'm glad that C.J. Stroud's doing well. I'm glad Anthony Richardson doing well. But if I had to redraft again, would Stroud be the pick? Probably, yeah. But I don't think that Stroud would have had a worse season than Bryce or that much better season than Bryce. I think it would have been a little better. But then again, it's hard to tell because Stroud does push the ball down the field, but it's hard to do that when you're not protected. So, yeah, I guess that sort of answers that question. What's up? What's up? Yeah, tough day. Jay Issue, what's good? Tough day, tough day, tough day. Everett really don't want to be a head coach. I think he does. I just think he just got outmatched today. No undefeated season, so mail it in. I agree, Ghost Daddy. So, just going to read a couple more of these comments, and then I'm out. Good to see you guys, too. I'm glad to be back. This is a 3 to 5 year rebuild. I think I read that already. Bryce seeing ghost at times. Yeah, I agree, T. Murray. I do think that Bryce is seeing his fair share of ghosts. Yeah. I don't think it's ghost in the Sam Darnold persuasion, but I do think that he is seeing ghosts. I also think this. I was a little concerned with the Canales play calling today, a little bit. And the reason is because we did see some really good play calls, and Bryce just missed some passes. Like, let's just call a spade, right? But I do think that there's going to have to be some reshaping of how he calls plays between under center snaps and shotgun. You know, I remember year before last when the Eagles were in the Super Bowl, and that year going in, they had, 60% of their snaps, I believe, were from shotgun, right? So a ton of RPO out of shotgun. Didn't see a lot of Jalen Hurts under center unless, just handoffs, a little bit of play action, but mostly it was from shotgun. When you have a 5'10 quarterback, I mean, we very seldomly saw Bryce operate from the shotgun at Alabama. I could count on my hand the number of snaps I saw when I looked at, back at games from the time that he started until his very last game against Kansas State. And I didn't see a lot of snaps from under center, right? So I think when you consider how short he is, and maybe he's just not a guy that's going to step up in the pocket, the way that you have to build this team is with guys who, I mean, like San Francisco. San Francisco is the greatest comp, right? You're going to build this team with guys who thrive in the RPO and guys who would thrive yards after the catch, which is why, and I know people might not want to hear this, I saw this happen earlier, and I don't know the reason behind why they did this, but I did see at one point Xavier Legette took over as the X, and Deontay Johnson was either moved, to a different, like, I saw him in the slot once, and I also saw him just off the field altogether. Man, I'll be honest. I feel like Legette might be better than we believe that he is. And I also think that his true position may be that X wide receiver. I like Deontay. I hope that he becomes the route running and separation specialist that, we've acquired him to be. But I did see a couple of times today, and I saw a couple of times in preseason where when things didn't necessarily go his way, you could just see a change in body language. I'll just say that, right? I hope I'm wrong. I'm not trying to put this out there for, people to look at him crazy. People may look at me crazy and be like, bro, what are you talking about? Like, when you're playing with a quarterback like Bryce, who wouldn't feel like that? Yeah, especially with that first pass, of course, where you miss the guy. But it's just hard to see, like, when you see his, like, Xavier Lee gets released off the line of scrimmage and just how he immediately creates separation. His first foot in the dirt off of the release is just lightning fast. I don't know. Maybe you try that guy out. Maybe you do, start pushing the ball down the field more and, he takes over that position. I mean, it is a 1-year rental on Deontay, unless they decide to re-sign him long term. So who knows? But using Excel for one kick return gave me really clueless on where we want our guys. I wouldn't. Using Excel for kick return. I mean, we used Smitty like that early in his career, so I wouldn't say that that's a. I'm okay with that. I don't think I really had that big of a problem with that, but yeah, thank you for that comment though. Let's see what else. I think Deontay needs to play slot and XL needs to stay at the X. When you bring in a big personality like Deontay Johnson, man, like, I noticed that in Camp Confidential. I wanted to go live so bad around that time, man, but I just had too much going on. But I thought it was interesting, that clip that they showed of Brad Isaac talking to him, and Brad's kind of like, hey, man, listen, we got a plan for you. We want to use you as the X, like just kind of lifting him up, telling him all this great, man, we're going to use you as the X wide receiver. You're going to be so great, all this other kind of stuff, right? To a guy that you literally seen quit on the field last year. Like, you have to kind of build those guys up, build guys like that up, unfortunately. But, who knows? I would hope that it's not the case that he is a guy that turns into a problem, but we just don't know what that's going to look like. So, but anyway, man, I've had a great time. Like I said, I'm definitely going to be coming back more soon. I just want to do this quick live, really unconventional. I don't have my mic. I don't have my, setup, graphics, none of that kind of stuff, man. But I just, it's been a while since I've done, consistent content. Want to consistently get back at it. Came into the content with smoke immediately, which I kind of like that. I don't like to be the guy, like, I don't like insults, or whatever like that. So I don't know, what that was about, that's fine. But beyond that, like, I don't mind the pushback. I love when people, disagree. I don't live in this echo chamber or this, in this reality where I feel like everybody's going to agree with me, and I don't agree with everybody. So that's cool. But either way, man, it was great to see y'all. Elliot, I appreciate you holding it down, bro, as usual. Definitely want to link up with you sometime, during this year, so we can chat some of the, usuals that I see around the community. I appreciate y'all being here too. But either way, man, I appreciate y'all. Keep pounding.